Were you aware that another healthcare worker was shot 1 month or so after Brian Thompson in New York was shot by the adjuster, and that this time also the shooter left monopoly money behind at the scene and referenced Luigi Mangione? Was this a copycat? Was it the same adjuster? Is the adjuster on the loose? How is this going to look for Luigi Mangione? And why is it showing up in June of all places when the shooting happened back in January? Let's talk about all those things next. And what surprises me about this is, in a way, this is an old story. It was in January that a doctor was shot in relation to Luigi Mangione and the United Healthcare situation with monopoly money and all these crazy coincidences and tie-ins. And I don't remember hearing shit about it back in January. Now in June, all of a sudden it's all over my news feed, and I'm trying to figure out why all of a sudden it's popping up when I didn't even hear about it back in January. So let's talk about this, because maybe you out there have already known about the shooting, but maybe you don't know why it's coming up. Why it's coming up is some of the new things that are coming out against this corrupt healthcare system again. And let me reiterate before we get into the nuts and bolts today that I am not advocating for violence. This is not a call to action. Nobody is saying that we should have vigilante justice in this country. That is not the point of this article. The article, however, is to have the big boy discussion. To cut to the chase, in this article, we're going to have somebody tell us how violence is never the answer, and tell us to do things like write to your attorney general, write to your senators, do those kind of things, which, by the way, have never worked. We've just finished a book called American Sickness by Elizabeth Rosenthal, in which she told us that we should do all those things, and then repeatedly told us that none of it has ever worked, and never has. The healthcare system is out of control. It does not do any good to elect new people into office or write to your senator or anything like that. So yet they continually tell you that that's how you should take care of this. Now, I am not saying, nor am I advocating, that vigilante justice is the way to do it. However, don't tell us, after telling us that vigilante justice is never the answer, to tell us that the answer is just writing to a senator or writing to the attorney general's office. That never works as well. So while I don't know what the solution is, America, the solution isn't to keep telling us to do the shit that doesn't work. Have you ever heard the definition of insanity? The definition of insanity is to continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. So writing to people and electing new senators has never fixed the healthcare system, and it's not going to. And again, not advocating for violence. But let's dig into the bigger issues, the growing sentiment in America about violence. And let's talk again about that shooting with the monopoly money left behind that I didn't even hear about, allegedly. I mean, I'd heard about other people being shot, but the monopoly money thing, that seems new to me. So let's talk about the monopoly money. Let's talk about the adjuster. Let's talk about Luigi Mangione in this article and break down the bigger picture. Kidney doctor's shooting comes as questions emerge about dialysis centers. So while this is in June 22nd, 2025, it is just coming out in all kinds of places right now. So it's talking about Dr. Andre Abua, who drove 18 hours from Miami to Terre Haute, Indiana, pulled up to the house of a kidney specialist and opened fire, striking the kidney doctor in the hand and being wrestled to the ground. So again, this happened in January, a month or so after Brian Thompson was shot, and I just didn't hear shit about it, nor about the monopoly money or anything like that. And now Abua is on trial, and it has trial dates coming up, of which I didn't even know this was going on for some reason. Now, granted, some of you probably already knew this. I get this, but I wonder how many of you, because I follow this case every day. I do long form videos every day, and I didn't really know about this story. So maybe I just freaking missed it, or maybe a whole bunch of you missed it. So this video is for those brave enough to admit, without having to sound arrogant, oh yeah, Mr. Avid, because I knew about that all along. That maybe some of you missed it. Maybe you missed it like I did, but it still has a lot of key points that we want to talk about in this article. So it talks about how accused in the shooting, which occurred 1 month after the brazen murder of United Healthcare CEO in New York, was Abua, a highly educated medical resident with a promising career. And then it says, but Abua had become fixated on one of the least understood corners in the business of medicine, kidney dialysis. So this whole article has to do with kidney dialysis and the problem with two companies, a duopoly, as it's called here. So we know about a monopoly and monopoly money. So we know about how there was monopoly money left in Central Park. There was monopoly money in this case as well. We're going to read that clear down towards the bottom of the article, almost like they bury the monopoly money part, probably because they didn't really want to make that connection. But anyways, in letters pinned from prison, so this shooter, Abua, has been in prison for a while now, since January. In letters pinned from prison and phone interviews on the website created by Abua, shared with CBS News his grievances, discussed Luigi Mangione's case in New York, and offered hints to the underpinnings of the alleged act that has landed him in jail, where he is awaiting trial on attempted murder charges. All right, so the prosecutors in Indiana said that they consider the crime abhorrent, of course, And they go on to say, this is prosecutor Terry Modisette. That's probably how close to how he pronounces it. Terry Modisette said that determined that the victim had never done anything to justify having violence brought against him. Modisette voiced a broader concern about what he fears is a growing wave of disturbing vigilante violence that has no place in a civilized society. So it makes me wonder how much this is being suppressed. How many things are happening out there that they're suppressing because they don't want you to realize there is a growing wave of vigilante violence happening, but they're keeping it. Are they keeping it out of the news? Or again, or I just missed this story because I didn't even catch it until recently. But let's continue on because maybe I just missed something. These cases that we read about in the news or watch on TV about the news, there's no excuse for this, Modisette said. Go out and protest. That doesn't work, by the way. Protests don't work. Go out and protest. Write your congressman. That also doesn't work. File a complaint. That also doesn't work. With your attorney general's office. Nope. In your state. Things like that. But no, there's never any justification to go out and murder someone. And that part I'm saying, okay, I get it. We're not advocating violence. I'm not advocating anyone go out and shoot someone. That is not the point. But these other things also don't work. Also don't work. No. Protesting doesn't work. Writing your congressman doesn't work. Filing a complaint with the attorney general. And they even say in that article, like they always do, they'll say in the argument, nothing has changed. People keep doing these things and nothing has changed. But they're certain to tell you violence isn't going to fix anything. Well, what isn't fixing anything is just writing things. Tom Mueller, the author, and now this is a big book and seems like it's prime for the Luigi's Bookshelf series that I do, where I read a book related to the case on a regular basis. Tom Mueller, the author of How to Make a Killing, Blood, Death, and Dollars in American Medicine. That sounds like a pretty salacious headline for a book, right? How to Make a Killing, Blood, Death, and Dollars in American Medicine. If I were to write something like that, somebody would come after me saying I'm advocating violence. This author can do it. A lot of people can do it if you know how to do it right. You can bring up the fact that we have a murderous healthcare system. You can bring up the fact, if you do it carefully, that the industry is putting profits over people, that they're making shareholders happy while people are dying and being mistreated. That is happening in America, and people are getting fed up and sick with it. And again, that doesn't mean that we're calling to violence, that anyone's calling to violence. But if we don't start facing the reality of what's happening in this country and try to find a way to fix it, and I'll guarantee you writing to your senators isn't a way to do it, and I'm not advocating for any kind of violence to do it, but the point being is that we need to start having the conversation. Even this article will say that. We need to start having a bigger conversation in this country. Things are broken in our country. It's leading to people getting so irate that they're going to go out and shoot MFers in order to make some kind of change because nothing's working. So you know what you do? Again, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. So some people are deciding to do something different. It may not be the right thing, but they're going to do something different for God's sake, because what we've been doing has not been working. All right. There is a visceral disgust for violence used to make the statement, he said, and there is a long-running dismay about the shortcomings of America's healthcare system, which may be costing lives. So it's the dichotomy. Yes, we don't want to advocate violence where people are shooting people, but he acknowledges we have a massive problem in our healthcare system and it may be costing people their lives. So the question is it okay to cost other people, thousands of people being cost their lives, and then outraging how disgusting it is that one human being is shot, because that's disgusting, and keep downplaying the thousands of people the lives are being cost every day because of the predatory healthcare system. This is the part that drives me insane. This is the part that I'm railing about, is again, let's be adults here. I'm not advocating for violence, but stop, for God's sake, villainizing everybody that kills one person or shoots one person and justifying it as a system preys upon thousands of people, and people die in the thousands. And you're like, hey, that's just their job. They're making money for shareholders. Anyways, that includes, he said, the rise of for-profit dialysis clinics and their impact on quality of care for those confronting end-stage kidney disease. So again, this whole article is about how new things are emerging about the for-profit dialysis clinics. This shooting was done because somebody was sick and tired of a dialysis doctor. And it was somebody who was an insider, a doctor, highly educated. By the way, these aren't dumbass people. These are not dumbass people committing these vigilante acts. These are educated people with degrees who are sick and tired of a predatory system. And I'm not saying they're choosing the right way to deal with it. I don't know how many times I can say that. I'm not saying they're choosing the right way to handle it by committing violence. But these are not dumb people. These are not monsters. These are highly educated people who are at their wits' end. This article will point out as well. People are just not knowing how how to deal with a predatory system that is killing people every day. That's the big boy discussion that they don't want us to have. And it goes on to say, Mueller's book basically says, unless we can talk about the systemic harm done by the medical profession, the insurance profession against patients, we're not going to get anywhere, Mueller said. So again, yes, we need to have some big conversations. If we keep acting like no one's allowed to talk about how predatory the healthcare system is and how thousands of lives are being lost because of policies that put profits over people, and we're going to keep acting like it's disgusting to bring that up because they're just doing their job for shareholders, we're never going to fix the problem. If we focus always on the monster who killed one person or shot one person in an act of anger against somebody who may be taking thousands of lives or impacting thousands of people just to make a buck in their pocket, and instead villainizing the one guy and not the one who had thousands of people who are their victims, this is going to be a continual problem. Stop mainstream media shaming people from having the discussion. Again, we can be adults and say, we don't advocate going and shooting somebody. I get it. But stop pretending like it's never a bad thing that somebody's making money for their shareholders, and we should just like look the other way, that people lose their lives so we can make money for profit. Mueller may be uniquely, so this is the author of that book, I believe, Mueller may be uniquely positioned to weigh in on both crime and the issue that may have been underlying it. For months before the shooting, he told CBS News that he and Abua, this is the shooter, had been corresponding by email about his book. So Abua found this book, this very salacious book. And by the way, is somebody going to come after this author and claim that he advocated violence? Because by the way, he talks, we use the word, I advocate for people. I am the devil's advocates. I advocate for people. Are people going to come tell me devil's advocates is advocating for people to go out and commit vigilante justice? I don't know how many times they can tell you, no, I am not saying that. Mueller wrote a fucking book, pardon my French, How to Make a Killing, Blood, Death, and Dollars in American Medicine. And somebody read his book and got so pissed off they went and shot somebody. Are we going to try and hold Mueller accountable for his thoughts? Or are we allowed to have big boy thoughts? And it's not his fault, Mueller's fault, that somebody took it too far. But we need to have the conversation. So where I'm afraid, America, is that we're getting to this point where we want to shut down freedom of speech. We want to say that Mueller, for example, shouldn't have been allowed to publish the book because somebody out there might be irresponsible and take it too far. Mueller's pointing out how disgusting the system is, I allege. I haven't read his book yet, but I read American Healthcare System, American Sickness by Elizabeth Rosenthal. And if Luigi Mangione allegedly had read that book and became influenced, if that's how it happened, that Luigi Mangione read American Sickness, which he mentions, and then went and decided that he's so disgusted at a system that kills thousands of people that he did something against one person, then we should be reading these books and finding out why. Why are these books so powerful that it's making individuals think that this is the only solution? And again, it's just talking points. That's all it is. There's no call to action here. In those emails, this is between Mueller and Abua, the shooter, which described to CBS News, he said Abua never gave any indication that he was spiraling towards violence. I can't tell you the number of people that write to me on my YouTube channel telling me they understand why Luigi did what he did if he did it. Let's make that clear. We're not saying Luigi Mangione is the shooter of Brian Thompson. He is a presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And there's higher nuances about whether or not if he did it, he's still guilty, because that's a whole nother discussion. But the point being is that people tell me all the time things that say that they're so sick and tired of the healthcare system. Should I be reporting every single one of the people who write to me to the feds telling them that I'm not sure, this guy might be a shooter someday, this woman might be a shooter someday? They're saying they're sick and tired of the healthcare system. That's all that happened here as well. All right. So then we talk about a particular individual, LaQuia LQ Goldring, 28, who's on dialysis. They kind of highlight this story. And then it says Goldring, this same person, is one of roughly 500,000 Americans dependent on dialysis to stay alive as they wait for hope for a kidney transplant, the only available remedy for those suffering from end-stage kidney disease. She receives the treatment at home and says dialysis clinics left her with no control over her care, treating her like a paycheck. She, like Mueller, believes that the industry has become too focused on profits. We all see it in America, I feel. Not all. I mean, I'm being a little rhetorical. Not everyone sees it. Some people are completely blind and think there's nothing wrong with making money for your shareholders, and F everybody who's dying on the process. It's just business. How dare anybody shoot anybody that's just making money for shareholders? That's their job. Again, I'm not advocating for violence. I will say that over and over again to keep myself out of trouble, because I'm not advocating for violence or vigilante justice, but I understand it. I understand it. This is emergency room care done in a mall, Mueller said. People are not given tailored treatment that they need. And then we get into these kind of quotes, some statistics. A review of federal data by CBS News found that 1/3 of dialysis clinics failed to meet federal standards this year. Nearly 2,500 of the roughly 7,600 clinics nationwide. The average score was 60 out of 100 possible points. Now, I want to point something out to CBS News. CBS News is kind of doing what I'm doing. They are very carefully, very, very carefully pointing out to America the statistics. Hey, we did a review. It looks shitty. It looks like Americans are getting fucked. It looks like you guys are in a really bad situation. But damn it, violence is not the answer. So media is being careful. I'm being careful to ride this fine line of trying to educate the public on how bad things have gotten in America without saying that violence is the solution, because you can't have vigilante justice in a country and have laws and have a good society if everybody's just going out committing anarchy. So nobody's promoting anarchy or revolutionary anarchism. I've been accused or asked if I'm a revolutionary anarchist. Sorry about the dog. This happens every time I'm doing a recording and I forget to put her in the garage. But the point being is that even CBS News, to their credit, is trying to very politically correctly address the big issue in America about healthcare without stepping over a boundary that makes it sound like they're suggesting it's possibly okay to shoot someone as the answer. So criticism of the industry has been disputed by two of the largest for-profit companies in dialysis industry, Fresenius and DaVita. So these two companies are the so-called duopoly. We're going to get into that. Fresenius told CBS News in a statement that the company maintains an unwavering focus on improving quality of life. I'm not going to get into all their shit. These are the two companies defending themselves that their for-profit tactics are actually just fine. Just fine. There's nothing wrong. We uphold the highest standards for our stakeholders. I mean, for America. The two companies dominate the national landscape of clinics where kidney patients come to receive regular dialysis treatments, crucial to keeping them alive. Roughly 90% of patients get their treatments in the outpatient clinics. And together, the two for-profit companies, that's Fresenius and DaVita, own 75% of all clinics, nearly 5,600 total. So 75% of the clinics are owned by two companies, the duopoly. The companies have become what Mueller calls a duopoly, as the industry has consolidated over the last 3 decades. That's the new trend of healthcare in America. Consolidate, consolidate, consolidate. United Healthcare was buying up everybody underneath them, becoming a humongous monopoly. This was why the Department of Justice was filing antitrust violations against United Healthcare. Why somebody allegedly got to the point that they were so pissed they decided to shoot somebody at United Healthcare, because nothing can stop them. The government can't stop them. No one can stop. Senators can't stop them. They just keep buying out their competitors, getting bigger and bigger, monopolizing and screwing Americans so that their shareholders can make more money. And then some asshole will jump on my comments and say, how dare you, devil's advocates? These people are they're just doing their job. They were hired to make their company more money. They were hired to make shareholders and investors more money. How dare you suggest there's anything wrong with somebody doing their job? They're good at their job, making people money. This is coming at the cost of lives. And we keep deflecting what's happening in this country, demonizing anyone who does one small thing to fight back against the horrendous system, and then we demonize them. And how dare anybody stand up against the system? These are just people doing their damn jobs, making money in America. Goddamn America. F yeah. The companies have become what Mueller calls a duopoly. We covered that. That industry dominance has a cost, according to Ryan DeVette, the Duke University economist who co-authored a study released this month looking at the toll of the scarce competition. So they've done a study into how this duopoly is hurting America, and so we get into some statistics about that. And I feel like it'll be too boring for you, but here's some of the highlights. We'll get some of the highlights. Last year alone, DaVita delivered more than 29 million dialysis treatments, earning $391 in revenue per session. That includes providing home dialysis treatments like Goldring, we talked about earlier, received through Fresenius. Together, DaVita and Fresenius reported a total of $33.7 billion in revenue from all of their businesses. It's big business. And when only two companies own the business, it's even bigger business. McDevitt said his research found that when the independent clinics are acquired by DaVita, so they buy out all their competitors, they buy out independent clinics, they consolidate and become this massive duopoly. And when they do that, here's the results. Transplant referrals drop by 10%, patient survival rates fall by 2%, hospitalizations increase by 5%, and infection rates go up by 12%. So we get less care, shittier care, more sickness, more hospitalizations, and they make more money. And then someone says, hey, dude, that's just doing their job. They're really good at their job. They make money. They're freaking rainmakers. And it goes on about how doctors are forced into prescribing dialysis care when they don't want to because they're being forced to. And this is what really bothered me too. Like this, just a hint. We're talking now about this guy named Stern, right? So this is a guy focused on her. Dr. Leonard Stern was at Columbia University, now at Columbia University. And he, according to this, Stern served as a medical director of an independent for-profit dialysis center in 2005. This is one of his independent center that he worked with was bought out by one of these two big duopoly things. When it was sold to DaVita, so he was working for them in 2005, it was then sold to DaVita, one of these big duopolies, buying up all the little guys. After the acquisition, he said there were times that the company instructed him to make more room for new patients. He said that sometimes that meant more billing for DaVita, even if it resulted in unnecessary complications and return visits for patients. Stern left in 2013. This is what I want to highlight. 2005, they take over his business. They start asking him to do shady shit. It wasn't until 2013, 8 years later, after them asking him to do shady shit that's bothering his conscience, that he finally decides to walk away from the company. 8 years. If it takes you 8 years to grow a conscience, and I'm not trying to beat up on Stern. What I'm trying to say is it's like the frog in the pot, right? It's the proverbial frog in the pot of water boiling, right? It doesn't feel the temperature changing. These doctors know that there's something wrong and they just keep taking it. They just keep doing it. And they're like, man, there's just something wrong with our system. It's broken. But it takes so long for them to decide to do something. And then when they do, they just leave. They don't fix the problem. Because they'll even say in here, there's a part in here where it says that he thought about becoming a whistleblower, but he was convinced that whistleblowing would do nothing. So he decided not to. He just left instead, because fixing the problem is never going to work. Whistleblowing is not going to work. It's just going to be blown off. He's talking more about this he calls it bazooka dialysis, where they pump you through this station as quickly as possible, McDevitt said, comparing the turnover model to any volume business. They need to turn over stations multiple times a day to hit the profit numbers to keep shareholders happy. That's all that matters. Keep the shareholders happy. It doesn't matter if it's good for patients. It doesn't matter if people are dying. It doesn't matter if people are getting sicker. It doesn't matter if it's for their good benefit. We need to make the shareholders happy. So pump those efforts through the system as quickly as possible. More money, more money, more money. And then if you get angry at one of these guys, how dare you? They're just making money. Most dialysis patients rely on the federal government to pay for treatment. The costs add up to $40 billion a year. It's actually 1% of the entire federal budget, which is a staggering statistic. So who knew dialysis? The cost of dialysis is 1% of the entire federal budget. It's big business. Despite the expenditures, about $100,000 per patient is what it comes out to be, according to McDevitt. The U.S. has among the highest death rates for patients on dialysis among developed nations. Why is the U.S. among the highest death rates for dialysis when it's big 33-point-something billion dollar revenue business for the shareholders? Just making money, sir. They're just making money. I don't know why you're mad. These people are just making money. They're really good at their job. Screw anybody who thinks that there's something wrong in America if they're doing your job. They're doing their job well. Here we go. One ongoing federal case against Fresenius accuses the firm of trying to fraudulently obtain hundreds of millions of dollars of federal funds by performing unnecessary procedures, an allegation the company denies. The two companies have settled at least 25 lawsuits, and CBS News has found that since 2015, Fresenius and DaVita paid out at least $1.13 billion in settlements. Here's the key sentence. and I have not seen an improvement in care following these settlements. Look at this, people. Look, it doesn't matter. Lawsuits don't even matter to them. They lose $1.3 billion in settlements. What a settlement is we're going to lose in court, so we're just going to settle. We're going to pay you a shit ton of money to shut your mouth. So somebody comes forward and they're like, look, you guys are screwing Americans. You're doing shit for profit. You're making people suffer. Well, you know what? How would you like a couple $100,000 to shut the hell up? Well, I don't know. That's going to change my life. Okay, I'll take couple $100,000 and shut the hell up. That amounts to $1.13 billion in settlements to get people to shut up, or companies to shut up about how they're making profit. And you know what? It hasn't changed a thing about the overall problem, because they're still making so much more money that it's profitable. Pay off people. Just find it, and maybe that's your tactic in America. Maybe our tactic in America, because violence isn't it, remember, and reporting people to senators isn't it, remember. So I guess just get to the point that you threaten suing, get a really good lawyer, and when they decide that they're tired of the possible threat, take a settlement. Maybe that's the way we fight back. Here we go. In January, for reasons Abua would not directly address in his letters and conversations with CBS News, the 29-year-old said he loaded his car with firearms and a bag of monopoly money, which he noted was similar to the one left by the alleged United Healthcare shooter Luigi Mangione, and headed towards Indiana. So again, did I just miss this? Did I just miss in January that somebody shot another person in the healthcare industry and had monopoly money loaded in his car and had referenced Luigi Mangione? And I'm only hearing about it in June. I know that there are stories that came out in January when it happened. I went back and looked on the internet, and there are stories. News agencies did report about it, but I sure the hell didn't hear about it until now. So ultimately, what does this mean? Does it look bad for Luigi Mangione? No. Because Luigi Mangione can't possibly be responsible for what's happening. Now, when I say no, I don't mean that somebody's not going to try to make Luigi Mangione look bad. Somebody is going to try to make Luigi Mangione look bad. They're going to say, the prosecution, I'm sure, in Luigi Mangione's case is going to try to tell us that these are the natural consequences that Luigi Mangione intended. When he shot Brian Thompson, which they allege, he intended for America to become violent and start making random acts of violence against doctors in the healthcare system. This is exactly what Luigi Mangione intended. That's the argument, essentially, that the prosecution is trying to make. Now, the defense will argue, and I think rightly so, Luigi Mangione has no control over what people do. And his actions, even if you can prove that Luigi Mangione did them, his actions are the actions of one man and one man only. He didn't incite a violence. He didn't tell the public to go after. He didn't write a manifesto telling everybody to take up arms and go out into the street. Luigi Mangione, even if he did these things in the so-called diary or manifesto that they say he had, didn't call people to action to go do likewise. He had made a personal decision at best case. At best case, Luigi Mangione had made a personal decision that he was going to try to do something because what has been tried by others hasn't been working. And maybe you don't agree. That's perfectly fine. Maybe you don't agree with a shooter's decision to handle it this way. Vigilante justice is a scary, scary thing in America. So this is no call to action for vigilante justice. But it does leave us with that bigger question. Can we please in America? Notice how CBS News did this. They tried to be very careful. They pointed at how horrible it was that somebody went and did vigilante justice and shot another person, but then told you, hey, by the way, here's maybe the reason they did it. Because these companies are screwing America and the system is out of control. And so CBS News has a good editor, somebody in there who's being very, very clever, simultaneously condemning the violence while also pointing out that this is a big problem that needs to be talked about. And we can't just sweep it under the rug by pretending it doesn't exist and saying dumbass, ignorant shit like they're just making money for their shareholders and nothing's wrong with making money for your shareholders. And how dare anybody have a problem with making somebody just doing their job? That shit has got to stop. Thanks for listening.